So Susan is going to be hosting this keynote panel. So I'm just going to hand the whole show over to her.
Thank you very much. Yes, so this is the keynote panel. We had a little get-together via Google Docs beforehand to discuss what we were going to talk about. And then about 20 minutes ago, I actually read what this panel was supposed to be about. So there might be some overlap. Right. Okay. The idea is just we've got three luminaries here and who are going to be talking about what's important in ALIFE and what's important to them about ALIFE. I'm going to be prompting them with questions when needed, but hopefully the conversation will go ahead without too many prompts. But what I'm going to do first is ask the panel to introduce themselves by telling you their name plus a very short description of what they are currently working on. Okay, so let's start at the far end of the table with Hiro.
My name is Hiroyuki Iizuka. I'm from Hokkaido University in Japan, and I currently work at the Center for Human Nature, Artificial Intelligence, and Neurosciences. And the center is very interdisciplinary. So we have philosophers and neuroscientists, cognitive science. I think somewhere KSK is also the member of the center, and then AI people. And then we just try, our target is just the mind or consciousness or ethics, that kind of things. And then I'm working on the cognitive modeling using a deep neural network. And then recently I proposed the superposition mechanism, but I don't, yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Is that working? Okay. Hi, I'm Emily Dolson. I'm an assistant professor at Michigan State University. The overall theme of my research is eco-evolutionary theory. A couple highlights of what I'm working on right now are I'm working on some evolutionary computation projects, in particular one where we're trying to evolve hardware for NASA to detect various astrophysical phenomena. Shout out to my grad student, Max Forbach, who's leading that. I've also got a project I'm really excited about where we're looking at kind of how different kinds of symbiosis, specifically endosymbiosis, shape kind of the trajectory of evolution. Shout out to my grad student, Kai Johnson, who's working on that. And we've also got a project working on kind of identifying game theoretic interactions in cancer to help find better treatment strategies. So that's just kind of a snapshot. They're all situations where we want to leverage eco-evolutionary dynamics to solve a problem.
Hi everyone. I'm Dominique Chen. I'm from Waseda University from Tokyo. I have been studying computer-mediated communication with human-to-human situation, but also for human to non-human situation. So I made this thing called the Nuka bot, which is a robot through which you can talk to the microbes, which is fermenting, really good tasting pickles. So I have published an extended abstract to ALIFE I believe in 2018. And then I haven't published a full paper yet. So I think I should do that by now. For ALIFE, so I have been collaborating with ALIFE people like Takashi, Hiroki Kojima, I see him over there. With Olaf too, I wrote a paper about a new conversation model last year. So I'm not like a full-time ALIFer per se, but I really enjoy talking with the ALIFE community. So thank you for welcoming here. Yeah.
Thanks everybody. So now we know what you're actually doing. Let's say something happens in the world and suddenly, for some reason, there is absolutely no funding for what you're doing now and you have to drop your current research. What other ALIFE topic would you then decide to study instead? I assume you would stay in ALIFE. Anyone want to start?
Actually, I'm working on what I want to do the most and within what I can do. So I'm quite happy right now, but I had to completely stop. Then I want to explore the brain organoids things. No, the ultimate goal is just I want to transfer my consciousness into the artificial biological neural networks. And but scientifically, I think we can create the different type of AI using the brain organoids, because it should be, which could be unique and precious and which can die, right, actually. So in the AI, we can just reproduce so many, the conscious, not conscious, but so many things, right? We can copy it so many times. But if it's organoid, then it's unique. So if I stop the system, then it can die. So never recover. So we can create the different type of AI. So I just want to do the brain organoid things. Yeah.
That's really cool. If I had to totally switch subjects, I think I'd work on like opinion dynamics and like how kind of information and ideas flow across social networks. It just feels like such an important topic right now and so interesting. I feel like I'd take like a really applied like perspective on it and try and figure out specific interventions we could do to like help make the general like consensus of the network be closer to like the actual ground truth. I think I work on what I work on with the eventual goal of kind of helping mitigate climate change, but sometimes I worry that climate change isn't what's going to get us. It's going to be opinion dynamics. So that's what I would choose.
So just to check about the question, so if we will cut our funding, right? So no money situation, or do we have a certain amount of money?
No money for what you're currently doing, money for doing other things.
Oh, okay. So I can get a new
Very
one.
unlikely.
Yeah, because there are so many things you can do for free, like so. But actually, like more just in the recent years, I'm trying to use less and less money, and not purposely, but so yes. Maybe this is not an ALIFE issue, but I'm really much interested in this idea of cognitive autonomy of people interacting with AI, especially generative AI, right? So this is a really hot topic of the day, so everyone's talking about it. But maybe we can apply ALIFE, the accumulation of ALIFE research to try to really think and how to improve our relationship with AI in general. So that would be my new field of research, I think. Yeah.
Okay, those were all very AI end of ALIFE, brain intelligence and so on. We now know what you're doing. We now know what you would do. But what are the most exciting things about ALIFE that are happening maybe in the near future that you would recommend to a new ALIFE researcher who you don't want to come and trample on what you're already doing or would do? Okay, so it has to be something new again. Sorry about this.
We can take order, right?
Sure, yeah, I can go. So this is, I guess, not what I'm doing, but I think it's a very wide open space. And one of the things I love about ALIFE as a field is that we have so many of those spaces where we're really person limited, not like idea limited. And I think that makes it a much friendlier field. But anyway, I think one of the things I'm really excited about that's happening right now is the potential for scaling things up. I think we're at a point where we've got a lot of systems that actually have the potential to do really cool stuff. And we also are at the point where we have a lot of ways to make them much bigger and much faster. All the work with GPUs, with EvoJax and EvoSax, I think is one path to that. Another one that I've been working on, really Matthew Moreno has been working on, is these giant AI accelerator hardware chips that we can also leverage for ALIFE. And I think there's just going to be more and more sources of massive amounts of computational power. And I think there's a lot of really interesting questions with regard to how artificial life systems scale. And there's also a lot of really interesting kind of like, really fundamental computer science work to do to kind of build the tools necessary to make that possible. So I think there's a whole lot of work that needs to happen in that field, but there's also a whole lot of opportunity and ability to probably get some really exciting results.
That's really cool because we know about the phrase more is different, and we do need more, and so maybe we're in an opportunity point now to do that. Although talking about, you were worried about climate change, talking about using massive computational power.
Definitely a trade-off.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, just recently, I got a grant to research on the relationship between the humans and non-humans, especially from the point of view of care. So care involves the feminist theory, post-humanist theories. So I've been thinking how I could make use of ALIFE study into that kind of discussion. So especially we include in non-human the presence of the dead, so dead human beings, but also dead any dead living beings, right? So I was trying to search into ALIFE past papers about people who made studies about this idea of death with ALIFE, and I saw many interesting papers dealing with the idea of mortality in the DAISY world simulations, etc. But these are like kind of statistic or kind of societal point of view, right? So I'm thinking about like how we can talk about death in ALIFE, but with a subjective point of view, or like phenomenological perspective. So this is just a kind of popping idea right now. So I don't have any solid view, but yeah.
But you would say that you could have a new PhD student in a death.
Artificial death.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially right now, it's an interesting moment because I heard in China, in mainland China, there are like more than 300 new corporate that try to simulate the dead people, the deceased people, using VR and AI. So this is a whole new industry coming up. But I would also like to throw like an ethical discussion into that, because I'm not a proponent of recreating everything with VR, and maybe I disagree with Hiro, who wants to upload his mind to the cloud. But so this is a really fascinating topic, I think.
To me, I think the recent advances in the large language models, or deep learning, deep reinforcement learning, or big data, or robotics, and where our brain organized, that kind of things is quite exciting development for me. And I think it's time to integrate those technologies and create life in a real world. So the reason why we have to create it, that we need to, I think, connect our community with the society. So if we can create a life, then the people can interact with the robot. And then even if it's not living things, but it's okay. I think gradually it's going to be our life, and then nobody can create the life from the start. But I think it's fine. But the important thing is that they create and showing to the society, and then we need to connect. And then I don't know if I can recommend the new ALIFE to do that, but I think, yeah. But I think that's the most exciting thing for me. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned there about the possibility of it becoming gradually alive. Do you mean therefore that you don't believe that life is Boolean, that it's alive or not alive? You actually think you can be partly alive, more alive, fully alive?
No, for
super
me,
alive.
For me, we can. In my philosophy, we cannot make a life, but the ALIFE people try to create the non-life things, but it's close to the life. So there are so many presentations that always I think, oh, that's not life, that's not life, but this is closer and this is far away, and in that sense. But the life is kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of the prime numbers. If the number is given, I can say, oh, this is not life or this is life. But we cannot specify or generate the life itself, right? It's like a prime number. So we need to just create non-life things, non-life things, non-life things. Then except for them, I think it can be alive. So always, yes. That is my opinion. That's my opinion, yes.
Can I react to that? Yeah. Yes, so I'm trying to throw this new idea of like how to conceive the dead beings, right? So the dead, the deceased family or the deceased pet or any living being that passed away. So I have been studying the personal histories of people who experience that they still live with the dead people, you know. So maybe we can talk about this in the context of cognitive mechanisms, right, or psychology. But I think there's like more about this phenomenon that could teach us about what life is. Maybe not in an ALIFE context per se, but so I have this feeling that, you know, even the dead people, they are still living or existing with us in a different way. So maybe this is too much philosophical. Maybe maybe it would be pretty hard to make a mathematical model about that, but.
Can I take a stab at making a mathematical model about that? I mean, is what you're saying kind of that they're still around because there's still kind of entities and concepts that exist in other people's minds and they influence those people's actions and lives?
Right. They have influence and they affect our emotions and behavior. Mm.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, you could say that they still exist because they exist in other people's brains.
Right.
Yeah, I think in that case, the definition or the feeling of life can change. Always the life and death at the same time. So if we define that life, then as a complementary, we know that death or no living things. So usually we try to focus on the life. And then, yes, life. And then science try to create the non-death or non-living things. And then try to understand life. But in that case, the distinction between the life and the non-living things, I think it's a vague. It's not clear so much. So that definition and the feeling of life is also changed. Not our feeling. I think it's a bit changed from the usual case, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have alive, then you can't be dead if you were never alive, but you can go through a state that looks like death and then come back to life. And I'm not talking religiously, I'm talking about spores or something like that, where they can go into a really dormant state where there's no living process going on. But I think this moves on to potentially the next question, because we all know that the ALIFE subject is a really interdisciplinary field. And normally when you say it's interdisciplinary, everyone sort of nods wisely and says, yes, it's computer science or biology or maths. But it's coming, certainly from this meeting all the way through, there's been a lot of philosophy. People have even mentioned ethics, social science, if I can say that, so that it's so interdisciplinary, it seems to touch absolutely everything. And most of the interest is in kind of the borderlands where these things touch together. Are there anything that you think that there's, because it's not just two things with one border between them, but it's a zillion things with lots of intersections, are there any underexplored or underexploited intersections where you feel that more work is needed, where there's lots of low-hanging fruit that you can make a quick high-impact paper, lots of possibilities, new interesting questions.
Okay, I'm biased because this is an area that's totally a cornerstone of my research, but I think there's still a ton of low-hanging fruit there. The interface of evolutionary computation and ecology, I feel like is something people haven't thought about very much. People do all kinds of things in evolutionary computation that create ecology. And people, in ecology think a ton about kind of the theory of ecology. And people in evolutionary computation often lament the fact that there isn't as much theory to describe evolutionary computation as we would like there to be. And so I think there's a lot of very quick progress to be made by importing theory from ecology into evolutionary computation. Because in many cases, they're mathematically identical scenarios, or at least evolutionary computation is mathematically identical to some of the models that ecologists use in forming their theory. And then similarly, vice versa, because they're identical, evolutionary computation is a trove of data that ecologists could be looking at as kind of additional modeling results on much more complex fitness landscapes than they usually think about. And so I think there's a lot of potential in both directions there. And really, more broadly, I think biological theory in general, there's a lot to be gained by kind of importing that into evolutionary computation in the places where it makes sense. I could go on. I think there's a whole lot of interfaces that are really powerful, but I can stop there.
Well, I think already the ALIFE is very broad, so I don't know so much. But I've been in the VR, virtual reality laboratory once, and I thought that the VR is very close to our ideas because they just use the participant to test their hypothesis. And then usually they try to create the illusion or some new sensation or new feeling in the experiment. So our modeling is just try to create the model of cognition. And then that kind of the way of thinking is very close to the VR people. And also they know how to show their results to the general people, the people. So they just they need to have the participant experience the feeling. So they create the context of the experience, and then they just can create the illusion that comes in. So I think VR is very important. That's my answer. Yes.
Yeah. He was mentioning about VR. Kind of reminds me of a really interesting research made by Mr. Hatada from Todai. He worked with this community of people living in Hokkaido called the House of Bethel. So it's a kind of Christian community, but it was founded by this social therapist, a Japanese person. His name is Mr. Mukayachi. And he's been directing this community for 30 years. And more precisely, he's hosting this community with people with schizophrenia. Can we say that way? Yeah, schizophrenia. So people who see visions, people who hears, hallucinations. So they've been prescribed, medicines, but the problem is that their hallucination experience is denied by modern psychotherapy, right? So this community tries not to negate the fact that they see things or hear things, right? So they invented this new approach of research called Tojisha Kenkyu, which is very hard to translate into Japanese. The research made by the person itself, right? And Hatada-san from Todai, he's a specialist in VR, and he went to Bethel's house and he asked everyone who's living there, so what kind of hallucination do you see? And every person, explained to him, I see, this thing, so this thing that looks kind of like a monster. I hear this voice every night around, midnight, etc., etc. And Mr. Hatada, he recreated this, hallucination inside a VR. So together with the people who described those experiences, right? And when I read the paper, I was like, so this whole process is really therapeutic. And, it's not a solution. It's not a solution-based idea of using, technology to, let's eliminate the hallucination. But that way, they are trying to find a better way to coexist with the hallucination. So, which is a very non-binary thinking, right? And I don't know. I just remember this idea, and I thought maybe this is, can give inspiration to ALIFE study too. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting because that's, ALIFE has got this tagline of life as it could be. What you're talking about there is more like consciousness or experience as it could be. We don't have to say it's what it currently is. It could be broader. It could be something else.
Exactly.
And it's not wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe another reason why I thought of that experiment is because I see more and more artistic paper submitted to ALIFE, and I really appreciate that because it's a new way to expand the idea of what ALIFE is actually, right? So not just about what life is or what life could be, right? And so I thought maybe we can reframe this direction as, how can ALIFE be helpful for people to, reconfigure their distance with their own realities that they see, not just facts or, objective, analysis, but subjective reality of what life is,
Yeah, we're all hallucinating our own world. It's just that some are easier to live with than others. Yes. Okay, so I hope the grad students and so on, they were taking notes about areas that they can potentially exploit there. So we're all very happy and think that great things about ALIFE, and we all really enjoy the research and so on. But what are the downsides of being an ALIFE researcher?
I couldn't think of any. Only good sides.
I think the ALIFE study is the interdisciplinary field. So there is no specific discipline. So of course, can be an advantage for science, but there are a few academic positions for this reason. I think that's a problem. So when I was the Takashi's student, my hometown friend asked me, "What are you doing at the university?" And I answered, "I'm doing the robotics." I said, no, because I didn't want to explain what the ALIFE is. It takes time, right? So, and then, wow, great, you are building a robot. And I said, oh, no, I've never built a robot. Then, sorry, I'm doing a neural network. And they said, wow, you are doing the brain. And I said, no, I never touched the brain. And I'm just using the neural network as a tool of the modeling. And then I moved to the VR laboratory. And then my friend said that you are doing VR. And then I said, no, never. I've never done the VR again. And then I moved to the information science department. And then my friend said that, you are doing artificial intelligence. And then, partially, yes. Yeah, that kind of thing happened. But I think this is because the ALIFE is not so popular worldwide. I mean, but that situation might change because the ALIFE Institute started, and then visibility of ALIFE can changing right now. So I just want to confidently say I'm doing the ALIFE. And then 3 weeks ago, the philosopher visited our center, and I said, I'm doing the artificial life, and confidently, and said, wow, great. Then I'm creating life on computer or with robots. And then he said, wow, great. What did you make? Or what makes things alive? And then I said, I don't know. That's what I'm doing. But the ALIFE is something like that. So, but if we can create the standard normal discipline, I think that's good for us. I think, yes.
Well, there is a famous phrase, isn't there, that research is what I'm doing when I don't know what I'm doing. So.
I totally agree. I share that experience a lot. I feel like every conference I go to, other than Artificial Life, I have to think, okay, do I call myself a computer scientist, an evolutionary biologist, an ecologist, something else? I think it also extends to funding, and that's a big challenge. Is like any grant I write, I feel like I usually have to spin as being like, oh yeah, this is a computer science grant, or this is an evolutionary biology grant, because the funder wants to fund one of those things specifically. about a year ago, I got a grant rejected, and I totally considered it an achievement unlocked because the feedback was that it wasn't interdisciplinary enough. I was like, yes, I sold it as not interdisciplinary. Okay, now it's time to ratchet that back up.
Yeah, I can totally relate to both of you. I major in interdisciplinary information studies, which doesn't mean anything basically. So every time I present myself, I have a PhD in interdisciplinary, information studies. I think I went through the same thing as Hiro, and like, oh, so what do you do? Oh, well, I do this and this and that, and I can never explain, but still, there are like so many departments in Japanese universities that are still trying to make a new interdisciplinary department, and but it's not easy. It's not easy to live as an interdisciplinary scholar because you always have to explain why you're doing this and not that, etc., etc. So is this supposed to be advice for students or like? Oh, okay.
What are the downsides, so that the
yeah.
students can run away at this point if they?
Yeah. But ALIFE, so when I met Ken, and he introduced me to Takashi, and I discovered that there's such thing called ALIFE. I was really excited, and I really enjoy participating in ALIFE conference because they're like everyone's different specialty. And I don't think I can see that kind of, diverse community in other, conference about technology design or like engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, we can survive, right? I think.
Yeah, so interested you mentioned funding there, because we had some success in the UK of convincing the funding agencies they should fund interdisciplinary research. And so they came out with calls saying this must be across disciplines, and therefore you must have principal investigators from more than one discipline involved in this project. And here's enough money for one postdoc. Do you think it's possible, really? Well, it is obviously possible, but how do you feel that there need to be as many postdocs as there are disciplines in a project? I've heard there was another conference I was at. Somebody said each parameter, each degree of freedom means one postdoc. But is it good for one postdoc to have to do all the different disciplines in a project?
So I read a really great paper kind of about that. It was kind of looking at like different paths to interdisciplinarity. And one was to have kind of a project where you have people from both sides. And there, I think if you want to do that right, yes, you need a postdoc from each side. But they were also talking about how there's this other model that's like building hybrid scientists that are actually specializing on the intersection of certain fields. And, I think many of us would probably count ourselves as being in that category. And I think that's also a really valuable path towards interdisciplinarity. And, obviously it depends on what the question is and why you need the interdisciplinarity. If you really need someone who knows all facets of evolutionary biology and someone who knows all facets of psychology or something, then yeah, you probably need people from both. But if you really just need people like at a very specific intersection, I think there's also room to, hire someone like an ALIFer to be your one postdoc that kind of brings together the disciplines that they need. And, is often, I think, a big strength of being at an intersection like that is if you really deeply understand both sides, you can see connections that even a pair of postdocs, one from each side, might have a harder time seeing.
Yeah, I think one postdoc, I mean, the specialist of something can be boring, right? So the important thing is that the target of the project, and then anyone is fine. One postdoc is also fine, but the important thing is just to get the target, what we need, and then every time I just learn the new things and this one and new things, learn this one, and then that happened to me, and then now I'm here. So I think even the one postdoc is okay, but he should be very motivated and also not specialized so much. If specialized, then they tend to have a very strict ideas. But they come to ALIFE, there are so many people and so many crazy ideas. I think that will be fine. Yeah.
I'm not encountering that problem yet because I have another problem is that there are not enough grad students in my university. So people are more and more, quitting university after undergrads, and especially because I belong to a humanities department at Waseda. So I'm like the only guy who's dealing with, weird digital technology things, and it's hard for them to find financial motivation. And also because Waseda is a private university, so it's kind of expensive than University of Tokyo, etc., etc. But yeah, I think like in my department in the humanities, people get interested in technology or like computation model and all the social implication of this whole situation. But maybe this is a problem in Japan and not so much outside, but I think young people are seeing more difficulties to imagine themselves becoming a scholar and getting an academic position. But maybe it's just in my case. But I don't know.
I don't think it's just in your case. I think the worse the job market gets, and certainly it's not good in the US right now, I think the more people feel that way.
Really?
Yeah, I think in computer science, we've been lucky for a long time because there's so many people getting pulled to industry that like the academic job market has remained attainable. So who even knows what's going to happen now? Because neither of them are good job markets at this point.
Especially this year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and another downside that isn't actually a downside, some people find, is if you're trying to publish a interdisciplinary paper in a disciplinary journal, if it's a mathematical biology or something, they will say the biology isn't deep enough, but the maths is nice, or they'll say the maths isn't deep enough, but the biology is nice. But there's a solution to this. Just publish in the Artificial Life journal, okay? That's right. So just before we go into Q&A with the audience, just to finish up, you've talked about what you're doing, you've talked about what you would do otherwise, you've talked about possible low-hanging fruit on intersections, but is there just one area of ALIFE that you feel is potentially quite important, but is actually being rather neglected at the moment, that nobody's actually working on it as much as you would like, even if you wouldn't want to work on it yourself?
Very hard question.
So one idea that I really would love it if more people picked up is Dave Ackley's idea of, we should give up on having computers that guarantee they'll always return the right answer. And we should instead build hardware where, there's a chance that it's going to completely break. But we can do that for much cheaper. And so we can have a whole bunch of this less reliable hardware, and the way that we have to program it then becomes very different. And so it's a really interesting algorithm design problem, and probably a really good place for bio-inspired algorithms. He's done a lot of work to push that forward, but he's retired now. And I think it's really, really cool. It is a challenging problem to work on. I've tried a little bit. I do see why more people aren't working on it. But that would be my answer.
Retirement doesn't need to stop you doing work.
Oh, and it hasn't stopped him either. I just feel like he needs a successor.
Can I confirm? Can I say my own work? You said the word no? If it's yes, then I can say one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks. I have one example. One thing is that's the superposition mechanism that we proposed 2 or 3 years ago, and it's really nice. So please search for the superposition mechanism on YouTube. You can see the video of our ideas. So please check it. And then one more thing. I think my main question in ALIFE is that why can't ALIFE simulation generate the hierarchical structures from the simple chemical reactions. And then that's always, I don't know how to do it. And then one thing is that I like the lambda calculus proposed by the Fontana a long time ago. And then he used the lambda calculus to describe the system. And then so many dimensions, so many creation of the chemicals, and we can simulate that kind of things. And now we have a computer power and also that idea. So if we can combine the computational power and the lambda calculus to the simulations, then we might be able to get the multi-hierarchical structure, that kind of things. And it's also yeah, that's it, yes.
Yes, I'm not so much knowledgeable about the current trend in ALIFE studies, but I always go back to this kind of very basic question of what is the difference between autonomy and automation, right? So when we co-wrote this book about ALIFE with Takashi and his students in 2017, we wrote about this kind of introduction, about, so what's the difference between AI and ALIFE, right? So AI research, which in its origin was not was not about automation. It was about, how to understand human consciousness, right, and intelligence. But today's AI became a whole industry where, or they try to automate everything, right, in a very efficient way. But I always think in ALIFE, we try to understand what is autonomy as opposed to automation, right? So I don't think this is neglected at all in the current ALIFE community, but I am more interested in how to connect that idea to the current social situation, in which we think we might be losing our own autonomy when we rely too much to the social networks or like generative AIs, and again, this is a really fascinating topic to tackle, to grapple with now, because we don't need so much funding to do that. Maybe we have so many lived experience in situated contexts. So yes, maybe that kind of how to understand autonomy again in this current social situation. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Okay, and there've been.
Can I say one?
Yeah, say more.
I'm always, I don't know if it's connected to social things, but always I'm obsessed with the idea of membrane in the autopoietic systems to create the autonomy. And then, so when I model the self with a neural network, if I connect that neural network with the world or the other agents, always just they create the whole dynamics. And then the agentness disappears. They cannot create the autonomy. So I think from that sense, we need to introduce some kind of membrane into the neural network. And then it's a long time ago, we proposed the homeostatic neural network and then so neural network is too flat. So we create the next stage of the neural network, then we introduce the homeostasis onto the neural network. And then that kind of things might work. And interestingly, LLM, when I use LLM is connected to the world. And always, I think the LLM can keep the consistency of something. So Takashi used the set called the Society of Mind. And then he just implemented so many LLMs. But those LLM can keep the consistency in that system and then never broken up. So I think that kind of the membrane property is important to create the autonomy, I think. Yeah.
I also, yes, that's really interesting. I also think about, so maybe this is not neglected, but maybe underlooked or not connected yet. But I'm trying to understand, autopoiesis, and there's been a long thread of discussion about autopoietic systems in other fields than ALIFE or like evolutional systems, especially like when people like Dana Haraway in her post-humanist discussion about she also talks about what life is, right? So she said, so we're not living beings. We are basically every beings in this world are becoming with others, right? So we are not isolated in the relational networks with other existence, right? So she invented or she updated the word autopoiesis to sympoiesis. So so life is basically what becomes with others surrounding, and maybe someone has already done that in ALIFE. I just don't know. But it'd be really interesting to connect these discussions, which is really lively now, especially in the climate change discussion. How we can reconfigure ourselves with a non-human world, right? So I don't know if you know that kind of ALIFE study. Please let me know. Anybody? It's a question, open question.
Well, thanks. I think that's an ideal place to now open the floor to if there's anybody got burning questions to put to the panel or to disagree with the panel. I know it's quite late, but some of you must have some questions, or you're wanting to go to dinner.
Hi. I've got kind of a strange question, I guess. I noticed this ALIFE, we had a meditation chamber. A couple of the talks bring up mindfulness and meditation and spirituality. So I guess I'm curious, what do you think about the role of spirituality in the ALIFE community?
Maybe I'm the least orthodox ALIFE person here, but yes. So I was talking about the problem of death. I mean, the relationship with the dead and the living, right? So of course that involves the question of spirituality, because when we look at the traditional techniques of people, of human beings, trying to deal with this idea of how to coexist with the dead, that involves religious rituals, traditions, performative arts, etc., which is so fascinating. And yeah, so how to connect that to ALIFE, right? That is a question. So I think it's a really delicate, a question that necessitates a delicate, operation of concepts and idea, because because I don't want to negate or offend any religious beliefs, and we have to be really respectful toward that. But at the same time, how we can objectively discuss about spirituality, for instance, in the context of cognitive science, what's happening in people's mind, right? And your question reminds me of the latest book by Evan Thompson, who wrote "I'm Not a Buddhist." So it's a really, did you read that book? No, okay. So he was a disciple of Francisco Varela, and he also, practiced Tibetan Buddhism, right? And he's so much knowledgeable about the whole history and culture of Tibetan Buddhism, and he also co-wrote the book with Varela, The Embodied Mind, right? And in his latest book, it's really interesting because he criticized the way modern brain science people, they try to kind of tokenize the idea of Buddhism as a way to, as an efficient way to reach nirvana, to reach the Buddhahood, right? And which has nothing to do with the religion of Buddhism, So so he criticized this kind of trend. You have to go to meditate to attain this inner state, this specific state of the brain to become more mindful, etc., etc. But when you use the teachings of Buddhism for yourself, you're actually going against the teaching of Buddhism because it's super egocentric, right? So that kind of discussion, and yes, his book was really inspiring to me in that direction. Yeah. I wonder what you would think when you read that.
Thank you very much. That was really great. Thanks.
I mean, it's a really interesting question. I guess to take a completely different spin on it, I think another thing that's really interesting about spirituality is it's, kind of a phenomenon that emerges, kind of at the society and group level. It kind of makes me think about the talk on was it Tuesday from the Softmax folks about, I think it's probably a mechanism for kind of like aligning groups in some ways, with common values, common things that they appreciate. And so, I think it's interesting from that perspective as like a thing you might expect to have in like a, model of a society. I guess the other thing I'll just say about that is I think one thing that's really nice about ALIFE as a community is the way it, values both the science and the art. And I think art inherently, touches on spirituality to some extent, or it can. And so I think a thing that's really cool about ALIFE is it leaves room to do science that is also meaningful to you on another level, if that's something that resonates with you.
Simply, I thought if we can create the neural network that can meditate, then it would be great. But the paper easily rejected. But if you can create some kind of the spiritual things in the neural network, I think it's great.
Are there any other questions?
We heard from you, Hiro-san, that finding life might be like a prime number. And don't expect there to be an answer to this question, but it'd be interesting to hear the panelists' thoughts on what the conditions for defining an artificial life might be that people could say, yeah, that deserves rights.
Definition? You said definition, right?
Yeah.
Definition.
What are the building blocks that you could build around that the general public would be able to agree that that is an ALIFE that deserves rights?
Not just alive, but alive deserves rights.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Susan, that alive is one thing, deserves rights is another thing. Like bacteria are alive. We don't usually think they deserve rights. I think those are both really hard questions in different ways.
Of course, there are some people that don't believe that other people deserve rights, so it's quite tricky.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what you guys think might be the nucleus that machine rights could evolve from.
The machine rights, right.
Autopoiesis can be answered. No? I don't know.
I think I'd draw the line somewhere higher.
So any autopoietic system deserves rights.
Yeah, for me.
That's interesting. Yeah. But yeah, for instance, that kind of reminds me of the discussion of the rights of nature, which is a totally different topic. But for instance, there's a river in New Zealand called the Wanganui River, which is quite famous, right? So I guess many of you already know, but so it's a river protected by the indigenous people of New Zealand, and it won. I mean, it has a right. It has a corporate right, right? So there's a human, advocates who defend on behalf of the river every time there's a construction corporate who tries to destroy the river, etc., right? So there is really interesting research on that kind of legal processes quite much around the world. So there's more interesting topics aligned in that line in the South American continent, in Chile, Colombia, etc., etc. So the human society has been trying to, attribute rights to non-human beings. Okay.
But a river can't speak for itself.
Exactly.
Would a condition be
Right.
that the machine was able to have self-representation?
Right. So the French philosopher and anthropologist Bruno Latour, so he wrote about this idea of, can you translate in English, daibensha, someone who speaks on behalf of non-living things, right? I forgot the English name of it, but he talks about it. What?
An advocate?
An advocate, maybe, yeah. I'm not sure what Bruno Latour wrote exactly, but he talks about it. So in his line of discussion, he admits that human being has exceptional power to talk, to narrate on behalf of non-human beings, right? So again, if you're against that idea, we have to, set back the line before that and try to not attribute this exceptionalism to human being. But it's really interesting discussion. And then people talk about more than human worlds, which started from David Abrams' book in 1996, I believe, where he explores the natural worlds in southern Eastern Asian countries, and he really understood that human being is not isolated from other existence in the natural environment, etc. But there's people in the AI research that try to use more than human to AI LLM and VVR robotic agent, etc., etc. So I think it's on the really cutting edge discussion about how to attribute rights to machine or like soft ALIFE. Maybe it's easier to talk about rights about protocells in wet ALIFE because it's so much relatable. Like you can love microbes better than software code, right? So, but I don't know. Do I personally attribute rights to LLMs? No. And maybe never.
I think that's a perfect place to stop. I can see that people are waving hands and really wanting to get into this discussion now, but I think we're going to have to move to a bar or a restaurant or something because people are getting hungry. So can I just ask for a round of applause for our fantastic panel? Thank you.